Good evening, everybody. My name is Connor McNulty.
I'm Dylan McNulty.
We're the proud grandsons of two World War II veterans, one being Henry Oehmen, and my grandpa Bob was in the Navy in the Pacific. We are the luckiest people I've ever met. I got to
No big deal, yeah.
I got to go to Belgium on the anniversary of him getting wounded, and it was the best thing I think we've ever done in our entire life. And this is the story of that.
Yeah. Thank you for having us. You know, we definitely appreciate keeping the history going for all veterans, and especially that we could brag about our grandfather is pretty nice. So thank you very much for having us.
We'll dim the lights.
Yeah.
All set, Lisa. So there he is. This is Henry Oehmen Jr. He's born in Middletown, 1926. Passed away October 19th, 1991. I was 2 weeks old, and Dylan was 3?
Yeah, about 3.
About 3 years old. There's a photo of him.
He was 18 years old in that picture. Yeah.
1952, he met Rose Prigitano out of Meriden. They got married, and luckily had my mother and my aunt, who are here tonight. Grandpa prayed that he would have girls because he didn't want any boys to have to do what he had to do during the war. And luckily, you're both here. Now, there's a picture of Dylan and Grandpa Hank in 1989.
I think 90.
1990. And of course, I missed him, but I caught the bug of being obsessed with looking in her attic and finding everything I could. This is a picture of me in 3rd grade. I finally got his uniform to take home with me, and she didn't want to part with it. It took her a while, which was fine. That's the first day I remember bringing it home. It still fits, and sorry about the shoes and the shorts combination there. Yeah, but that was the first day I took his uniform home.
Also, with his uniform was a nice trunk. These are a couple of newspaper clippings that he saved from the, was it the Thunderbolt?
So this is the TTF. So these hints that got us to this point were Grandma's attic. He had a scrapbook. These are TTF, which is the 331st Regimental newspaper. He's in the 331st E Company. This is their newspaper, was printed once a month, and he had a scrapbook and personally clipped out all of these and kept them. I've seen the full article of the newspaper, but for him to cut these out, is that important?
Yeah.
To us it is. We'll get to a few of those later. Next. Okay, I found his Purple Heart in the attic. This is his Victory Medal. At the bottom right there, you can see a bullet. So Grandma tells me Grandpa has a Purple Heart. I took that literal. I didn't understand what that meant at all. I probably asked her, well, what color is your heart? It didn't make any sense. Growing up, I found out, of course, you get one for being wounded, of course. I said, Grandma, how did he get his Purple Heart? The story that she told us, this is important, she sat me down and she said, your grandfather was in the Battle of the Bulge. He was wounded 5 times. The Germans went out and shot the bodies of the wounded and the dead Americans. They said a big ugly German was aiming at him. As soon as he was going to pull the trigger, they blew the whistle, and that meant go back to the tanks, get out of there. He got up, he walked 3 miles to the hospital, and was saved. This is the story from Grandma. So that got me interested. That got me proud and just on this journey that we've been on. And this, of course, is one of the bullets that they took out of him. Okay. Then I found his discharge paper. Some of you might be interested. He's actually discharged from the Army Air Corps. He didn't have enough points. In World War II, they had a point system. You got points for how long you were there, points for medals, points for, Purple Heart. He didn't have enough. They transferred him into the Army Air Corps as an airplane engine mechanic. He was on a air base in Warrington, England. So he's discharged from the Army Air Corps. We'll also get into that in a little while. So I found a letter of his from the 60s. The 83rd Infantry Division has an association, and they reached out to him and said, we do this every year, we have a reunion, we'd like to invite you, you're a veteran, please join. I don't think he ever went to a reunion, but I do believe that he joined because I have a few of the magazines that they sent him, which being a member, we get a magazine every month. Probably 2016, I looked into it, they still existed, and I only had to mail the check to New Hampshire. So I said, I'll join as a descendant, and every year I get invited to a reunion. My first reunion was in 2016, and I took my first plane ride ever to be in Washington, D.C. This is a picture of the first reunion, and I met this gentleman. His name was Bill Spriggs. He was F Company 329th. I sat down and spoke with him, and everybody gets a name tag, and it says who your descendant was and what your name is and why you're there. And he looked at it and he said, wow, E Company 331st was Grandpa Hank. He said, we carried water for those guys. And I waited my whole life. My first plane ride, my first time meeting a veteran from the 83rd Infantry Division was Bill Spriggs. And this is the picture they took. He told me, yeah, we carried water for your grandfather. So it was just unbelievable that I had already accomplished that. And now here we are, and there's so much more that we've accomplished. So this is the group we traveled with. We've got the best friends in the world. I'm, again, the luckiest person I've ever met. Just to introduce everybody, because first off, they took all these pictures. They did a lot of research. They've helped me continuously, and they've been my foxhole buddies ever since we've met. On the left is Bob Konings. He was our host. He owns a bed and breakfast in Belgium, in Grand Menil, which is part of Manhay. And he also is a ultimate expert of everything Battle of the Bulge. He does tours. He hosts you. He will take you specifically wherever you want to go. He's just a sweetest guy in the world. Then we have Dylan, of course. Next to Dylan is one of my best friends in the world. His name is Glenn Nightingale. Glenn is from England, but he owns a house in Normandy. In 2016, I met him at the first reunion. We hit it off immediately, and he said, anytime you want to come to Normandy, please do. In 2019, for the 75th anniversary of D-Day, I stayed with him for 2 weeks at his house in Normandy, and he is the smartest 83rd lover of all time. Then you got the ugly kid there, that's me. Next is his son, Ben Nightingale, who is even smarter than Glenn. Next to Ben is my buddy Rick Tarenko. Rick is from Ohio. His dad was F Company 331st. Next to Rick is Elaine Nightingale, Glenn's wife. Behind her, the giant guy there, that's Tom Thomason. His dad was 330th A Company, 83rd Infantry Division. He's the president of the 83rd Association currently. And on the right there is one of my other best friends, Nils Hagemann. He's from Germany, but he does reenact United States, and he's from Hanover, which is also 83rd Territory that was liberated by the 83rd Infantry Division. So here we are in the bed and breakfast. Again, Nils, Rick, Dylan, Elaine, myself, Ben, Glenn. We got Tom over here, and that's Wilfred, who is another expert in the region where we were, who took us out and gave me a lot of nice maps and things and that as well. And then here we are at a monument, myself, Rick, Tom, Dylan. This gentleman here is Eddie Munfort in the black jacket. Eddie Munfort lives in Bion, Belgium, which is the town where Grandpa was that we're going to get into. Eddie Munfort wrote this book. It's called De la Neige et du Sang. I never bought it because it's in French. And what a mistake. This is a book, it's literally about the 5 days that we're about to go over in his backyard, his neighborhood. He's been to more reunions than me. He lives in the country, you know, where everything happened, and it's one of the best resources I've ever had. He actually was nice enough to sign it for me, and he took us on a tour ourselves, and it was just great. De la Neige et du Sang means blood and snow. Okay, and then most important, this gentleman on the left, his name is Thijs Heidemont. Thijs is from the Netherlands, and then we have Glenn and our host, Bob Konings. I wish every division in World War II had a Thijs Heidemont. Thijs is responsible for a website called the 83rd Infantry Division Documents. And every morning report, every after action report, anything that has to do with documents of the 83rd, he's put it online for families and descendants like us so we can go on to it and read it. And if you have a question, you will find it on this website. He's been working at it for years. I met him, I think, 2016, and he's been an angel ever since. I'd never met Grandpa Hank. I got all these answers from that man on the left who made this website, and again, I wish every division could have a Thijs Heidemont. So this is a message from him about the 83rd Docs, just kind of what it's about. He's just a sweetheart. Battle of the Bulge Tours, this is a bit of a plug, but our host, Bob Konings, this is his company. He will take you to whatever specific part of the bulge you're interested in and just show you what you never could believe what he could show you. This is where we stayed. This is the bed and breakfast. It's called Bo Temps. We were next to a church. They had a German sniper in that church during the war, and this building here is his bed and breakfast. It sleeps like 50 people or something crazy, but this is where we were. It's in Grandmenil, Belgium. There's a breakfast and the fire there. He put Grandpa Hank's picture on the mantle for us. That's not a real deer. This was the war room, we called it, where every night, I think Dylan got a little realization after we do a tour all day long, we just go sit and do more research. And he's like, you guys are crazy. You know, they just kept going. We had breakfast down there every morning. This is Bob, the host, again, the expert of all experts in the field of Battle of the Bulge. He's talking to Glenn, and then he's telling us about the Battle of the Bulge. Okay, here we have just the normal map. Everybody's probably seen that before. Just to tell you that the bulge, we're in the center section. Okay, so we first find Grandpa Hank in the morning report, December 31st, 1944, New Year's Eve. They took him in a truck, couldn't go any further because of snow, and they said, everybody out. We're not going any further, good luck. Happy New Year, it's 1945, welcome to the ETO, you're in. So they get out, you know, this guy, you're an F company, you're an E company, you're in, you know, K company. Grandpa got put in E company December 31st, 1944. From the 1st to the 9th, they pretty much traveled by truck, slow, you know, 3 miles a day. Basically, the reports were stand guard, you know, wait for further instructions. So our presentation, we're going to start on the 9th. So the Noordergear zone is a map coordinate. It's a British system. Tice's website, we can punch in VP6287 and find exactly where they were. But they're in Verlemont, Belgium. He's E331st Infantry Division. So here's the after-action reports for the 9th and the 10th. On the 9th, the regiment received orders to attack south the vicinity of Oehmen, to seize Langelier and establish a bridgehead south of Langelier River. 2nd Battalion, so E Company is part of 2nd Battalion. Anytime I mention 2nd, it's E Company as well. 2nd Battalion is on the right, 3rd Battalion on the left. The time of the attack is 11:30. 3rd Battalion jumped off on time, but 2nd Battalion did not leave line of departure until 13:30 due to traffic and weather conditions. This was the coldest winter ever on record in Europe. The snow was waist deep, and I believe it was like minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit for almost 2 or 3 weeks. So there's considerable resistance was met by tanks, high velocity artillery, and air bursts from anti-aircraft fire. Harassing fire fell throughout the area during the night. You can go ahead. Here's a map out of Eddie's book. You see Oehmen is right there in the middle. Bion is down here where Eddie's from. Then we have Petit Langelier and Langelier. All of those are important coming up. We have Hebronville, Jubaval. He was in all those towns. 2nd Battalion is leaving Oehmen there, and this is the line of the Germans. They're against the 9th SS Panzer Division, the 12th Volksgrenadier Division, and I believe the 4th SS Panzer Division. Here's the 2nd SS Panzer Division. So here we are in the 10th, January 10th. Noordergear zone, they're in Oehmen, Belgium, E Company 331st. As well as the after-action reports, Tice has put up all the morning reports. If you're looking for a veteran, the morning reports are almost better to find out than the after-action reports. The morning reports were written every day. The after-action reports were written at the end, maybe even a few days afterward. There's more details, there's more specifics, there's more personnel. All that stuff is in the morning report. If you can get your hands on those, I recommend, you know, those are best. So here's a map we have from Wilfred. This is the front line as of January 10th. So in our after-action report, 2nd and 3rd Battalion jumped off at 0700 from positions occupied the night before. The attack was met by small arms, mortar, tank, and artillery fire, and stubbornly resisted. In the 2nd Battalion area, the enemy counterattacked at 12:10, but the attack was beaten off, and the 2nd Battalion advanced to the line. So here on the 10th, the Bois de Rance is a forest. We have Bion, we have Oehmen. This is obviously a veteran-made map. He's got it dated the 11th and the 10th, but the front line as of the 10th is this one you see there. Okay, so here we found the crossroad. Bion, Oehmen, Langelier are all to the right. So there we are. And then we have this. This is a monument in the town of Oehmen, which is dedicated to Henry Tannenbaum, who was killed on the 10th. I'm not sure why it says the 11th. We haven't figured that part out yet. However, this monument is kind of a big deal. So when I went to my first reunion in 2016, everybody told me there was a massacre in Oehmen, but nobody talks about it. For me, that was kind of a big deal. Why aren't you talking about it? What is happening? You know, what do you mean? And there's not much known. All of this research is credited to Bob Konings. He just published probably the most exciting research of this few days in Belgium that I've been thinking about for 25 years. He just came out with a publication. It's the Oehmen Massacre, An Inconvenient Truth. So we have to get into a little bit of it. This is an article that Grandpa Hank cut out personally. It's called The Doe Takes Beating to Witness Massacre of Wounded by SS. So Grandpa cut this out. The story through history is that there's a Sergeant Harry Shoemaker took his men into a field in Oehmen. They were ambushed. Everybody laid down, either dead or wounded. He was the only survivor. He played dead for 10 hours. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw 2 SS men come out of the woods, check the bodies. If anybody showed signs of life, they got a bullet to the head. If they were already dead, they took their wallets, they took their
Wedding ring.
anything of value, they took. Harry was there, and then at 10 hours later, got a moment in the night, got up, ran back to the command post, and found the sentry, told the story. There's a massacre in Oehmen. So that's how it's been told over and over again. Several blogs, 83rd websites, other newspaper articles. This is what I've always heard. So I think we can go to the next one. Here we have a picture. So the gentleman on the right kneeling down, that's George Taranko. That's my friend Rick's dad. And in the top left here, we have Sergeant Harry Shoemaker. I think you can go to the next. Okay, so we have this field in Oehmen. We believe this is where the massacre happened. In 2009, I believe, a veteran came to Bob Konings' house. His name is Bob Kaufman. He knocked on the door. He said, Bob, I'd like you to research what happened in Oehmen on the 10th and the 11th. Bob said, okay, and he said, why are you interested? Bob Kaufman said, because I was there, and I've never heard anything about the massacre. I didn't see any members of the 83rd Division, and I don't remember hearing anything about that. So we have this field, we have this story. Bob spent 11 years figuring out what happened here, what is going on. So to get into things, Bob said, okay, what's the source of this massacre? So far, it's Harry Shoemaker. There's no trial, there's no JAG report, there's no, interviews. There's not much at all about this. So he said, okay, let's look in, and we have to find out about Harry Shoemaker. Jumping back, the 83rd Infantry Division's trial by fire was the 4th of July, 1944, 1 month after D-Day. It was a very naive decision. They went up against the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment and almost entirely were annihilated. So we have the 7th of July, 6 miles south of Carentan. If any of you have seen Band of Brothers, there's an episode about Carentan. The men who took over Carentan after they left was the 83rd Infantry Division. There was heavy fog at 4:45 a.m., 1st and 3rd Platoon of F Company, Harry Shoemaker's in F Company, moved through open terrain, found a farm. F Company was about 50 yards from the farm. They got pinned down. To the left of F Company, E Company was almost annihilated near La Rairie by German snipers and patrols. F Company did manage to take the farm for a half an hour. The Germans reattacked after a counterattack, and they found an American speaker. They played over loudspeakers an Al Jolson record. So, psychological warfare. This is the first time Harry Shoemaker has been in combat. 1st and 2nd and 3rd platoon try to get there, and they all get pinned down. Eventually, everyone dropped their gear, their radios, their weapons, and when the chance came, they took off. Harry's evacuated July 31st, 1944 to the 622nd Rest Center of the 134th Medical Group. The 622nd Rest Center was a psychiatric hospital. Normally, patients come in, they get treated, they continue to do the military, drills and training. They're usually out by 2 weeks. Harry Shoemaker was there for a month and a half. On October 8th, 1944, at least you can go to the next one. On October 8th, 1944, he was assigned back to F Company, 331st. They entered Luxembourg. This man had PTSD. He's a troubled man. He should not have been leading troops. He's in a psychiatric hospital for a month and a half. They send him back to Luxembourg. Exactly 1 month later, on the 8th of December, 1944, they're in Gay, Germany. We can conclude that F Company and E Company went out together. They got mixed up. Just battle, that's how it goes. One guy's yelling something, the other guy should be yelling something. Everybody's mixed together. It's just chaos. The leaders could not command troops. So we know that he led his platoon, but he stayed behind 300 yards. Possibly because he froze out of terror, out of just being already mentally unstable. And the company commander stepped in, held the attack because the group was considerably weakened due to casualties, and the remainder of the company was not following the assault echelon. This is the command post where Harry Shoemaker came to the morning of the 11th and found the sentry. If you go to the next one, Lisa, this is the command post today. So we fast forward from the story earlier to February. The 331st gets a long pause, a much needed break. They get to relax in February. March 4th, they move to Neuss, where the company is outposting the Irf Canal. On the 7th and the 8th of March, the screening of civilians continued. Training began by all companies, battalions in assault, boats, and street fighting. On the 8th of March, Harry is mentioned again in the morning report to be dropped from assignment as of the 7th of March to the 113 evacuation hospital. His hospital admission card we found, diagnosis, fracture, compound, communicated with no nerve or artery involvement, location, phalanges of index finger, causative agent, bullet, pistol, or revolver. It was the last time he left the 83rd Infantry Division, and he would never return as a soldier. After the end of the war, he could not be found, so JAG could ask about what happened in Oehmen. There's a letter from the 4th of October, 1945. It says he was transferred to Lowell General Hospital in Fort Devens, Massachusetts. Bob looked into if they had a psychiatric unit. In November 2021, they got back to him. Indeed, he had seen some horrors of war, and after treatment in France, he may have been a hospital helper at Fort Devens or a patient. If you want to go to the next one. This is us at the command post. One more. These are the fields in Oehmen. So we have to go back to January 10th. Harry Shoemaker walks into a field. All of his men get mowed down. He's terrified. This is the third time he's lost his men in battle. He doesn't know what to do. He's there for 10 hours. He uses a body to cover himself with. Then a U.S. tank comes over the hill. He's surely thinking he's going to die. A tank comes. It takes a direct hit. Men are on the back of the tank, falling off, dying, getting shot. Keep going.
Oh, I was going to say,
10 seconds after the first direct hit, the tank takes another shot, and the left pistol port explosion immediately takes out our tank. 2 more tanks come, same thing, direct fire, they explode. Harry Shoemaker is looking out of the corner of his eye, like we've heard about, and the 3 tanks are now on fire. He can see everything. All his men are dead. His messenger next to him is dead. It's just tragic. Well, he finally makes his way, gets up, walks back to the command post, and this is how we have the birth of the massacre at Oehmen. Now, Harry might have believed that he saw the Germans come out of the woods, and maybe he thought that had happened. Maybe he should never have been there. Maybe he should never have been leading troops again. However, this is where we get the only source from the massacre is Harry Shoemaker. Now, Bob looked into the IDPFs. IDPFs are the individual deceased personnel files. They tell you where they were found, what they had on them, how they were killed, and Bob expected, of course, everybody to have gunshot wounds to the head. Bob found 3. In an ambush, in a combat situation, there's 250 men in a company. It's understandable, these platoons, of course, were much smaller. It's understandable you have a few in the head. There were 3. To give an example, one of the IDPFs I have is a private first class John William Jack Shepard. He was born on 19th of July in 1912, and he was from Fairfield, Connecticut. The type of wound was a gunshot wound to the chest. He assigned and joined from the 92nd Replacement Battalion as of December 31st, 1944, the same day Grandpa Hank got there. He was missing in action as of January 10th, and killed in action as of January 11th. On him, Jack had religious articles, 1 fountain pen, 1 tobacco pouch, 1 ring, souvenir money, a billfold, pictures, cards, and $93 on him. We also know, if Harry Shoemaker was the only person to survive, that this isn't true. There were 11 prisoners taken off that field and put in a Marshall farm, which is a family name down the road from here, actually. There were 11 prisoners in the basement. So why would the Germans take 11 prisoners, shoot the rest? Why would they leave Jack with $93 and take the rest? Why did this become a thing? One of the prisoners who was in the basement has been interviewed and talked to. They said, he said the only reason the Germans took him is because he looked like he was 16 years old. He was 19 at the time, and he looked like such a boy. The German must have felt bad and said, okay, we'll take you prisoner. So Harry's not the only survivor. They didn't all get shot in the head, and there's 11 prisoners, and nobody saw or knows about this. If you keep going, so these are all Oehmen photographs. Here we are.
It was raining.
It was raining. Keep going. Yep, taking care of Glenn. So there's Bob on the left telling us and showing us photos and explaining, his research. It just, for me, was a big deal because I've heard of this my entire life. Keep going, yep. So there were Oehmen, yep. These are the fields. There's foxholes everywhere. Everywhere you go, you can find them. They're, you know, all on the road, everywhere. But this is Oehmen.
Just a little comic relief. The farm that my brother's talking about, where the 11 prisoners were held, is still standing. So I took the interpreter. We walked over there and we knocked on the door to see if we could go check out the basement. Well, I don't know any kind of French or Dutch at all. So the interpreter goes, "Hey, we have some Americans. We heard the story that there was 11 prisoners in your basement. Could we come in and see what it's like?" And all she said was, "There's no Americans in there right now." We go, No, this was 1945. She goes, "Oh yeah, well we redid it. It's changed since then, so you won't even recognize it." You know. So, long story short, you know, the building's still there. The fields are still there. The roads are obviously still there. It was literally walking in history books. You know, when you saw us with the umbrellas, Bob was explaining all the stories to us, and the fact that we could go and touch, you know, the barn and, you know, look in the cellar window. It was pretty epic. And again, you know, what my brother's getting at is, you know, the stories we grew up was there's a massacre, you know, all these things happened, and now that we're there in 2023, we're kind of finding out that it's not really the case. So.
And there's no Americans in her basement.
And there's no Americans in the basement. We can all rest assured.
Yeah. Okay, so next. All right, we're on to the 11th. They're 3,000 yards southeast of Oehmen, Belgium. Eddie Mumford is from Oehmen, and this was important because he's here for the next 3 days, and of course, we're getting to the Purple Heart. This is an article that I found also on the website. This is the staff department of the Infantry School of Fort Benning, Georgia, for Advanced Infantry Officers Course from 1949 to 1950. This is the operations of Company A, 331st Infantry of the 83rd Infantry Division at Langleer, Belgium, for the 11th and the 12th of January. So basically, they're using what happened with Grandpa during these 5 days to train new guys in 1950. We can learn and get there. Well, from this article, I concluded and found out we have, so at daylight, the 11th of January found the 1st Battalion on the march moving toward Oehmen. The men had had a good night's rest and a hot breakfast. The morale at this time was excellent. In the meantime, the battalion commanding officer and staff, company commanders with radio operators and drivers were moving by jeep to Oehmen to make the reconnaissance, arriving just as the sun was rising. Also, just at the same time, the enemy decided to counteract the town. They struck with approximately 200 infantry and 5 tanks. The attack caught the 2nd Battalion completely by surprise. Most of the men were asleep. Before the attack could be halted, the enemy succeeded in capturing the southern half of the town. To withdraw was impossible, as all avenues of escape were out, if not by men, then by fire. The firefight raged for almost 3 hours before we succeeded in routing the enemy and driving the few survivors back into the forest. The only casualty suffered by the reconnaissance group was 2 men killed and 1 wounded from Company D. The 2nd Battalion suffered quite heavily, but succeeded in knocking out 3 enemy tanks and killing an estimated 100 infantry. So we have the instance on the 10th in Oehmen. Grandpa Hank is in reserve, probably watching the entire thing, those 3 tanks getting knocked out. They go to sleep, and on the 11th, he's woken up by 200 Germans and 5 tanks. He's 18 years old. He got there on New Year's Eve. This is being taught how to deal with it to other troops in 1950 of all this stuff that this poor 18-year-old kid from Middletown, Connecticut had to go through. So we have the after-action report on the 11th. At 2:10 in the morning, the 2nd Battalion moved to Oehmen and from Oehmen to Bahrain. Company E at 4:15 in the morning moved to the woods southeast of Bahrain to block to the west. At 0900, the Germans counterattacked with 5 tanks. 3 were knocked out, and the remaining 2 withdrew. 2nd Battalion maintained their position to the end of the period. So here's another map from Eddie Mumfort's book. This is the 11th of January. Again, they're woken up by 200 Germans and fought for 3 hours, and at 9 o'clock they left. Thank goodness. So we can go. So here we have photos of beyond Belgium. Now, if you folks can see the chapel in the background, and down here it's tough, but the same chapel is just here in the before. This is January 12th, 1945, and that was our picture that we took January 12th, 2023. So it's the same road, the same building, and the same chapel. This is kind of a famous photo. This is 2nd Battalion in Bahrain moving up the road. You see the roof, same field. We didn't see the wagon, but there's a tank in that photo, and there's men coming up, so I came up the road the same as the 2nd Battalion coming up in Bahrain on the 12th of January 1945. Now this is a command post. Here you have the 83rd Infantry Division on the Jeep. Of course, there's snow everywhere. The roof is gone. There's just bedlam going on, but this is the 1945 version of where we were. And that's the same building there. So me, Dylan, and Rick made it to the same driveway. They added the garage since. So we were on the 12th. Again, 2,000 yards southeast of Bahrain, Belgium. Organization E Company 331st. This is the after-action report for the 12th and the 13th. On the 12th, the 2nd Battalion continued its blocking mission and extended its line in the column of companies to the south. So there's points, and those are map coordinates, and the rest, 3rd Battalion, what 1st Battalion was doing, and all that. We have 115 casualties, prisoners 115, 11 killed in action, including 1st Lieutenant Arthur K. Ungren, and wounded in action 37 on the day of the 12th. You can hit that. Okay, here's our map of the 12th. 2nd Battalion has made it down here. This is Bahrain, Belgium. Autre's over here. We have Langlair, Petit Langlair. They came through the woods all the way down to here. This is 2nd Battalion on the 12th. Grandpa's final objective is down this way. We'll go to the next. So we have the 13th. On the 13th, the 2nd Battalion continued its attack the night of the 12th and the 13th, and by 4:10 in the morning had reached its objective, edge of the woods. The attack was slowed by dug-in tanks and infantry. Daylight revealed that 6 tanks and some infantry had been bypassed during the night and split Company E. Our tanks moved forward to meet the enemy and knocked out 1 tank and lost 1 Sherman. So Grandpa Hank is fighting the night of the 12th into the 13th. He's in E Company. They bypassed 6 tanks in the middle of the night in the forest. Dylan can vouch for me. I had no idea what day it was the 2 weeks we were there. I had no idea what time it was the 2 weeks we were there. And I didn't have anybody shooting bullets at me, or my friends weren't getting killed. I don't know how they figured all this out. It's just the confusion. So he believed his entire life he was wounded on January 13th was a Friday. He loved Friday the 13th because he didn't get killed. If you look at a calendar from 1945, January 13th was a Saturday. He had no idea where he was. He thought he was in Luxembourg. He was actually in Belgium. We didn't know what country we were in, and it's just totally easy to figure that out. So here on the 13th, we have, this is the woods south of Beyond, 2,000 yards. He's fighting around here. Next one. So as a kid, as a young adult, there's a location on this after-action report. When we got to Belgium, they said, where do you think it happened? I knew immediately. I said, I think this spot on the map is where it happened. This is the first time I've ever seen the spot in my entire life. We walked there, and I knew it was in these woods. And they checked the maps. They said, oh, my goodness, you're right. I think you're right. So I know I'm right. This is it. So that was the first time I saw it. This is the first time we went to it. Now, if you could see on the right, it's so dark. The woods are just as thick as could be. If you could easily get lost in there, we had to whistle to each other and just make sure everybody was accounted for. But if you knew, you go in there, it'd turn into nighttime. It was that dark. It was that thick. And for the first time in my life, on January 13th, I got to go to the spot where Grandfather got shot. And it's just there to the right in those woods. So this is the other view, so it's the woods on the left. We were informed they didn't dig foxholes too far into the woods because of the same reason. You'd get lost, it was pitch black, it just was a dumb idea. So most of the foxholes are actually still close to the road, which is nice if 6 Tiger tanks aren't driving past you. So everything is kind of right in here. Again, this is the woods. Within 1,000 yards or a few hundred yards, I can say, we successfully found the spot where Grandpa and the men of E Company 331st went through hell on the night of the 12th into January 13th, 1945, 78 years later to the day.
That's my phone.
Well, turn it off. If it's his, turn it off. If it's yours, you're fine. Anyways,
In my pocket.
here we are.
Going off. It's on the chair behind you. Sorry, everybody.
Okay.
Connor, that's swamp here, is that, what kind of land is
So it's actually, it's moss. I mean, it's almost like grass. It's cushioned, it's nice, it's just, yeah, squish, moss. But the foxholes were all filled with water. So,
You think those trees are like 75-year-old?
no. So it took us a while to find, we call them war trees. Their main export is logs. They're all cutting down the forests forever, and that's their livelihood is the woods. So it took us a long time to find trees that were actually there during the battle, but we did, and that was almost as exciting as finding all the other stuff. But yeah, so here we are. It's Betty Lane, Rick, Nils, Tom, Eddie, Dylan, and myself. This is a foxhole that we found in the woods, same spot, and had a toast for Grandpa there. So here's us finding it. Sat in the back of the truck and go. It's all muddy. Luckily, it rained the whole time and didn't snow, so we got through all that, which was good. Then you got the boys over there. Yep. Here's more foxholes. I mean, it's just unbelievable how pronounced they are. You can't deny them. Okay, that's a foxhole. So we did do some metal detecting. I've got pieces of shrapnel. We found some chain from an MG-42 German machine gun bullet belt. We've got a few belt buckles, but that was sitting in the woods. Again, these foxholes are 78 years old, and they're just sitting there. It's almost like nothing's changed. Again, metal detecting, getting rain.
So the feeling of you being on sacred ground must have been pretty intense there.
This was the most profound, most thing I've ever experienced. Again, because I've been just so interested in searching my whole life, and I knew that spot. I knew where it was. I knew how to get there almost, and I'd never been there. Dylan never left the country, and we got to the spot, and it was just like, I think this is it. And from what I've been able to figure out, we know again within 100, 200 yards, this is the spot.
Do you know how long the Germans were in wait there?
Well, the battle started on December 16th. They did make it pretty far. One of the other benefits was we didn't only do 83rd things. We went to 101st Airborne spots. We went to Bastogne. I saw 82nd Airborne foxholes. We did a lot of other things. So they made it pretty far. I mean, to be fair, the Germans did do a bulge, for a reason.
So they were there first, and we came in to take that back.
Yeah, I'll explain it all at the end. Yeah.
Just quick, this is a funny story. Our grandfather's favorite drink was a 7 and 7. And our British friends and all our other friends we went with, they ended up smuggling a couple of Seagrim bottles in their luggage. So when Connor and I are hugging each other in the foxholes, just over emotional, it was a sad day or an emotional day. It was nice. We turn around and everybody's got shots of Seagrams and 7 ready to go to toast to our grandfather, and it was very nice. We're not lushes, we're not alcoholics.
It was a touch, yeah.
We did celebrate for all those guys.
It was a touch, and there's the pour there, and then so yep. Keep going. We left flag in a hole, so that'll be there as long as.
Yeah.
Here's again, yeah.
Just crying again, yeah.
We're a little upset. Okay, so this is, we have morning reports from the 14th of January, of course. I'm going to try and read it. As of the 13th of January, 1945, the battalion jumped off in the, so, yeah, I don't need to read all, okay, yeah. Basically, okay, so back to that one quick. Yeah, that's okay. So, again, I tell you, the morning reports are much more detailed, they're much better, they're much more accurate, they come out more frequent. So this one's interesting. I can read it to somebody if you're interested afterward.
Connor, sorry, buddy. What's the difference between the action in the morning?
So the morning reports were written every morning, and it was enlisted men, changing outfits, changing F company. You're going from F company to K company, stuff like that. They're just letting you know, but they also records of events. These ones I should have printed out so I could read them for you. And the after action reports were at the end of the day, but they weren't written every day. So it could have been days, and then they would say, okay, well, that's what happened on that day, but it's not as accurate here as the mornings.
The commander writes the morning reports?
There's a bunch of staff there's staff, that does all that. Yeah. Okay, so this one was pretty good. I found this page here. Dated the 13th of January, 1945, day grandfather got shot 5 times. For company, 2nd Battalion, in the rear. This is their bill. Money for champagne and cognac ration due by noon on the 15th of January, 1945. For champagne, they own 111 Belgian francs, and for the cognac, they own 111 Belgian francs, or 25 marks per ration. So, 2nd Battalion champagne, bottle of cognac. Here's your bill, boys. you gotta pay up. But it's funny because it's the 13th, so hopefully grandfather got a little taste before he finished. So here we have another part of his cutout newspapers. This one is SS atrocity spurs men to objective. Down here on the bottom, he's actually mentioned Private Henry Oehmen of Middletown, Connecticut, was wounded 5 times by a burp gun, refused the indignity of a litter, and walked 3 miles over the rough wooded terrain to the battalion aid station. So he cut this one out because he's in it. It states an SS atrocity spurs the men to an objective. If he had kept the whole newspaper, I'd understand. He cut out all these newspapers, just the articles, for either 3 reasons. He knew who was in them, he was there, or the Harry Shoemaker article, because it happened to him. Grandma Rose told us as kids the Germans were shooting the dead bodies. It doesn't help her to make that up. He cut these ones out. Again, maybe he thought he saw that, but this one mentions him. He never met Harry Shoemaker. He wasn't a part of F Company. He watched the whole thing happen, but he cut these out for a reason, and it's my job to figure out why. This one, again, SS Atrocity, spurs the men to the objective. Down here it says, you know, they were all dashing happy, and you know, there were no match for their Browning automatic rifles, and those Nazi supermen were no good. But again, we've got Henry Oehmen refused the indignity of a litter. He was wounded 5 times, and he walked 3 miles to the hospital.
What's
And
a litter?
so a litter is an ambulance or a stretcher. So they said, Hank, you got shot 5 times. He goes, I'm okay, because he could walk. So he said, I'll walk. And through waist-deep snow, he made it, you know, 3 miles yet to the hospital.
Yeah, as the bullets went on record, his wounds, in theory, froze. Otherwise, he would have bled to death.
If
So,
he had been wounded the same in Normandy or in any other of the campaigns for the 83rd Infantry Division fought in, we would not be here talking to you. He froze shut, and he was able to carry himself off the field and to there.
Yeah, we're not allowed to say that we're cold or that we, you know, Mom, can I get a winter hat?
Right.
We're not allowed to say that.
Now, he walked 3 miles to the battalion aid station, and he met this man. This is Lieutenant Gevers. Gevers was the 2nd Battalion surgeon who 100% gave aid and surgery to Grandpa Hank and took that bullet that's been in his metal out of him. And this is his photo. I know that for a fact because in 2018 at a 83rd Infantry Division reunion, it was in Boston, I went to dinner at a Legal Seafoods. We all get the name tags here. It says again your name, your outfit, what you know, why you're here. I sat right across from this man. I didn't speak a word to him before that. I never met him in my life. I sat across from him. I looked at his name tag. It said he was the son of the 2nd Battalion surgeon. And I said, wow, my grandfather was 2nd Battalion. How long was he the surgeon, and you know, what time period was he surgeon? He goes, well, my dad was proud because he joined in the end of the war. He joined December 31st, 1944, same as Grandpa, and he goes, I know for a fact it was him that took the bullet out of you because he was the only surgeon there. So when he walked to this battalion aid station, he met that man. And this is the son of that man that I sat across from and enjoyed a supper with, which you can't make that up. That was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And then here we have, we did attend both the cemeteries, Henry Chapelle in Belgium, and we went to Margraten in the Netherlands. All USA cemeteries, and proudly so honored. Every single grave, there's thousands, every single grave is adopted by a family in Belgium or in the Netherlands. So once a year, they lay flowers, they take care of it, they clean it up, they pull the dead grass, you know, of course they have labor and everything, but a family goes and sees every single one of these guys once a year at least. Most of them do it often, and we just couldn't be more excited, that they're all not forgotten. Go back, please. So this is important to me. The first descendant of the 331st 83rd Infantry Division E Company person I've ever met was a woman in New York. Her name is Teresa DeMauro. This was her uncle. Her uncle was killed on January 13th, 1945 in E Company, same woods, same everything as Grandpa. He was 19, he was wounded in the leg, and he bled to death. I've known her before I met anybody else. I said one day I'll go, and I got to find John T. DeMauro's grave. We put a flower in the flags, of course, but that was a full circle. I got to go see John, who was killed on the same day that Grandpa Hank wasn't, and he lucked out because he froze shut, and John will be there forever because he didn't. He was a 19-year-old kid. He joined on January 2nd, 1945, and on January 13th, the poor kid got hit in the leg and never made it. But I am honored I got to lay a flower at his grave. Now we could do the next one. And now the next one, this is also very personal. This is Staff Sergeant Roy Norman Harrison. Roy Harrison was from Texas. He was an E Company 331st Staff Sergeant who was also killed on January 13th, 1945. I had the honor and privilege to, in 2019 in Normandy, put his personal belongings in a shadow box, which is in one of the greatest collections of 83rd Infantry Division things I've ever seen. It was left in England after he passed away, and he has been repatriated. His body is in Texas, but we have a lot of information. So Roy joined the 83rd. They were pushing the Germans back through France, Luxembourg, and Belgium. After surviving difficult battles in the Hürtgen Forest, Harrison was promoted to Staff Sergeant on December 15th and became a squad leader. He was reported missing in action on January 13th, 1945, and ultimately his status was changed to KIA as E Company 331st fought their way through Oehmen, Belgium. By 4:10 a.m. on January 13th, the 2nd Battalion had reached their objective, the edge of the woods southwest of Langelier. The events that led to his death are detailed in the company morning report, January 14th. This was one that I couldn't read. Company encountered stiff opposition from the moment of bypassing Company F's objective at 1700, the 12th of January 1945, southeast of Bienne, Belgium, and were held up by 2 tanks and automatic weapons. At 0700, the 13th of January 1945, Company again resumed the attack, meeting very stiff resistance. At 1400, the Germans counterattacked through Company's position with 5 tanks and approximately 1 company of infantry. 250 men. Attack was repulsed at 1700. Company was relieved by the 3rd Armored Division and for a new area, and trucked to a new area in the vicinity of the rear command post. Very cold and clear, sure in need of rest and retreat after steady 5-day commitment. So Roy Harrison is in the same boat as Grandpa Hank. I have, again, seen all his personal items. We couldn't add one. Oh, here's everything, you know, there's one, his wife and child. There was a picture we couldn't add. I got another honor. We took Roy's dog tags and the rosary beads that he had on him when he passed and put them in memorial in the spot, January 13th, the day of, 78 years later. And took a picture, and unfortunately we just couldn't add it to the thing. But we have this also, his death is detailed in a letter written by one of Harrison's squad members, a friend, on the night of January 12th, 1945. When we attacked a crossroad 250 yards south of Bienne, Belgium, we got to our objective fairly easy. It was very late at night. The Germans made this terrific counterattack. In the cause of the attack, we had quite a few killed. Roy saw this German first. His rifle had frozen and it failed to fire. The German up and shot. It hit Roy close to the heart, I believe through the lung. We crawled over to him where the medic bandaged him up. His breathing was bad and we could tell he was bleeding internally. Roy could talk and just as calm as ever told us what happened, that he was hit. He mentioned he thought of you, learning he was hit. He said he was in very little pain, but was getting cold. So 4 of us took off our overcoats and wrapped him up to try and make him as comfortable as possible. The attack was getting worse and we were losing more men. The only way we could move was crawl. Roy told us to take what men was left and try and get out of there. We told him we would attack back as soon as possible and bring a litter. I'm sure Roy realized he wouldn't live. He was only interested in the rest of us getting out. The next morning at daybreak, I led the attack myself to find him dead. So we have January 14th, 15th, same. Their station is changed to Langelier, Belgium. E Company 331st. This is a picture of German POWs they took dated January 14th, 1945 in the town of Oehmen. Then the last time we find Grandpa Hank in the morning reports, this is this January 15th, Oehmen Henry C., seriously wounded in action as of the 13th of January 1945, dropped from the assignment to the 67th Evacuation Hospital. So here's our grandpa, the curly-headed guy on the left, both of those. He didn't have enough points. He joined the Army Air Corps after his stint in the hospital. He was in the hospital in Le Havre, France. They moved him to Warrington, England. In England, he joined one of his wounds. You could see he lost his left pinky finger. I always looked for pictures of him and said if his pinky's there, it's before the war, and I knew if it wasn't, it was after. So these are much later on. He had a nice time. You can keep going, Lisa. My newest development, my next bit of research, I just found a note that was written by my grandmother. It said that while he was in England, he got a new kit, new rifle, and was on a train heading back to his unit. So he was going to go back to the 83rd, maybe E Company. They might have put him in anywhere else, but he was going to go join the 83rd again. They're on a train in England. Next thing you know, it's VE Day. The war's over in Europe. His train went AWOL for 8 days. They disappeared for 8 days. After 8 days, he turned himself into the U.S. Embassy, and his punishment was kitchen duty. So I've got to talk to all my friends and say, did you ever hear about a train full of 83rd guys that disappeared for 8 days when the Germans surrendered in Europe? Because that's my next part. So we got the miscellaneous pictures. Here's some just before and afters. Again, they're tough to see. I can show anybody who's interested afterward. We've got dead Germans and the 83rd men coming up this road. You could see the building here, the same building that's there. That building's the same. Obviously, there's more trees and less snow. Here we have the German headquarters. So we showed you the Americans. These little lines here, those are German graves. Right in front of that building, that 1945, that's how it looked. And we went and said, I think we know where we are. We found the spot. And they had men buried right in the yard temporarily, of course, there in 1945. This is an 83rd, but you could see the bend in the road. There's a Panther tank right where Dylan's standing. And then if you go up pretty much a couple miles, you get to our bed and breakfast where we were staying. So it's just everywhere you go, it's all over the place. This was a wonderful relics museum. We went in there and got a tour. There were vehicles all up the entire road. They're not usually open, but they opened because we had a march that day. There's just me in the back, and then we went in. Of course, they had a bar, which was great. If you keep going, we were soaking wet, and that stove had been there since probably 1925, and it was the hottest thing I've ever been next to. Oh, yeah. But it dried us out immediately. This woman spoke no English. She just heard we were Americans and was so honored and proud. She goes, please thank your grandfather for us. This is unbelievable. It's wonderful to meet you. And everybody around there was just so pleasant and just so excited.
So her husband actually, he's the one that runs the museum. And when he found out that we were descendants, he said, well, do you guys want to go see some artifacts that were pretty much taken from the same patch of woods that your grandfather was in? So
he said absolutely.
So yeah, of course we want to. So it brings us immediately to these two guns, and both of these were pretty much set up in the exact direction area that our grandfather was in. So I would say 90% chance that one of those two guns is the gun that shot our grandfather, and we were able to touch him, which was creepy, but...
We know it wasn't a burp gun, which would be an MP40, which is the newspaper said, but that bullet that's in his victory medal, and Geevers pulling it out of him, it did not come from an MP40 submachine gun. It most likely came from one of those.
Big ones.
And they just said, yeah, you want to see what we found there? We said, of course. Our buddy in England who couldn't make the trip, Warren Abbott's, made these jackets for us. So we have Hank, I always called him Hank, and Henry because you're older. Middletown, Connecticut, USA, but brand new tanker jackets as soon as we got there, which was great. This is 2 minutes down the street, walking, 2 minutes walking. There's a Panther tank right there that was captured in this town. It was one of the biggest minefields in the area. This one didn't get hit with a mine. It sunk into the
Mud.
It sunk in the mud and got stuck there.
Yeah, a lot of the smaller villages and hamlets have these leftover tanks in their squares, as monuments, and very well taken care of. And it's, everywhere you go, you just...
There's artillery pieces everywhere. There's tanks everywhere.
Tank,
They care. It's really, really wonderful. This one's pretty good. There's a King Tiger tank, which was the biggest tank in the entire war. I put my leg next to the tread of it, outstretched. It was my entire leg, how wide the track was. This one is funny. In 1947, the USA had to go around and collect all these things. So our guys get to this town, they say, hey, we heard there's a tank here, we're here to pick it up. And a woman came out and she said, well, we kind of like it. It's our town, like it's our thing. What can we have it? And the guy said, well, what do you have? And she said, how about a bottle of cognac? And the guy said, boys, pack up, we're out of here. So
Fair enough.
the town paid for that King Tiger tank for one bottle of cognac, and they said, you can have it, it's yours. And it's still there to this day. Of course, German Shermans, that might have been Bastogne.
Yeah, that was fast.
And here's, again, it's just foxholes. I'm 6'1". That's almost up to my belly button here. You could tell the difference. There's foxholes, there's shell holes, and there's German trenches, which you could tell are different from all those. But that was one of the biggest foxholes we found. And I believe that's, looking somewhere. We did have a march on the end of the day. On the right here, the gentleman in the green hood, he was a Belgian veteran, 98 years old?
97.
97-year-old
He was about to turn 90.
Belgian veteran who was there and was honored to meet us, so we got our picture with him, of course.
Yeah.
This was
Bunker.
Joachim Peiper was the awful perpetrator of the Normandy massacre, which was earlier in December. He hid out in this bunker when the U.S. Air Force came over, and we got to walk into there. But that was Joachim Peiper's bunker. That's just overlooking again. Everything is pretty much the same. Obviously, the trees are different. There's less snow, but it really hasn't changed at all. And this is one of my favorite pictures. Grandpa Hank. I like this one because he's smiling. All the other ones, he looks terrified or he's not happy. There's not a lot, but this one was my favorite. He's in the snow. He's got his medals on and he's happy. No ruptured duct, so he's still in the Army, but he looks like he survived. And thank God he did. So here we are. And then lastly, this is Dylan and I in Henry Chappelle Cemetery. There's 10,000 men buried there again. Every single one of these graves is adopted and taken care of, and they won't be forgotten.
Can you tell them about when you got to the point where Grandpa was, about the weather that happened while you walked into the woods?
Okay, yeah, quick, lastly, she's right. So we went on the anniversary. It was important to us to be there January 13th, January 12th, January 11th, January 10th. We wanted to be there to feel it, see how cold it was, kind of go through what he went through.
Yeah.
If it had snowed the way it had snowed in 1945, we wouldn't have been able to do half of the things that we were able to do. It really worked out. It was great. It rained. It was gray most of the time, but that was okay also. Back on the spot where I knew he was wounded and where they were, we walked into the woods. We got there, we walked in, it was dark, it was cold, it was just, okay, you know, the first time I found it, here we are. You turn and we looked out, it started to snow for about 2 minutes. I looked out, I go, Dylan, are you seeing that?
Yeah.
I go, do you believe this? And everybody stopped, we looked, it wasn't snowing on us because we're in the trees, but it was snowing in the field. It snowed for 2 minutes. That was the only snow we saw the entire trip. That was all we got, and it was Grandpa saying, you found me here, you know, you found me. And we lucked out because we went there again, so we said if we can go twice, we'd love to, of course. So on the 13th, we went back. We came from the north this time. It was raining all day long. It was gray, ugly, wet, just bad weather.
Mud.
We got there, we came down from the north, got to the same exact spot, and the sun came out. And it was him again on January 13th saying, you guys did it, you know, go home.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Now, did you find the area where he ended up, where the hospital would have been, or not?
So I'm still looking into where the hospital was. We know that it was allegedly 3-mile walk. I think Grandma told us it was 7 miles. You know, there's some research to be done, but that's next. Yeah, one of those. But
One more.
yeah, Mother.
When you went to the museum and there was that picture there.
Well, there was another story. Okay, yep.
Just one more.
Lastly, we went to a museum in Bion.
Yeah. Dedicated to just 83rd stuff.
It's an 83rd museum. We went in, walked through it. It was nice. We kind of did him a favor, and you know we're pleasant. Then we went out. He showed us foxholes and things around. Then we came back to the museum after exploring the neighborhood. Came back in, and they go, "Hey, we got something to show you." He had a picture of Grandpa Hank on the wall.